She stood before 300 of London's elite and did the unthinkable. She publicly refused a duke. Not with trembling apologies or ladylike excuses, but with her chin raised and her voice unwavering. The scandal should have destroyed her. Instead, it made her his obsession. Because what no one in that glittering ballroom knew was that the Duke of Ashford had been watching her for months from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. And when Miss Eloise Ashton dared to defy him before the entire ton, she didn't ruin herself. She sealed her fate. This is the story of how one bold rejection became an irresistible claim, and how a man who never lost control lost it completely for a woman who refused to be tamed. But to understand how it all fell apart so spectacularly, you have to know how it began. 3 months earlier, in a quiet drawing room, with a single glance that changed everything. The spring of 1817 was unseasonably warm in London. Lady Annalise's musicale was one of those tedious affairs that Sebastian Greystone, the Duke of Ashford, normally avoided at all costs. Small rooms packed with people. Mediocre performances by daughters of ambitious mothers. Endless small talk about nothing of consequence. But his closest friend, Captain James Hartley, had insisted. "You need to get out," Hartley had said. "You've been locked in that tomb of a house for 6 months. Thomas wouldn't want you living like a ghost." Thomas, his younger brother, dead at Waterloo 2 years ago. The brother who was supposed to inherit everything, who loved society and people and life. Sebastian had survived the war without a scratch, only to watch his brother die in a field hospital in Belgium. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was the spare who became the heir, the soldier who was supposed to fall, not the golden boy everyone adored. So he went to the musicale, if only to get Hartley off his back. He arrived late, standing in the back of Lady Annalise's overcrowded drawing room, a glass of mediocre wine in his hand. Some girl was murdering a Mozart piece on the pianoforte. The crowd was the usual mix of London society. Mothers eyeing him like a prize stag. Daughters stealing glances and whispering behind fans. He'd become used to it since inheriting the dukedom. The title made him a target. The fortune made him irresistible. His complete lack of interest made him a challenge. It was exhausting. He was planning his escape when he heard her voice. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the polite murmur of conversation like a knife. She was in the corner of the room, near the bookshelves, surrounded by 3 older gentlemen who looked both amused and annoyed. And she was arguing with them. Actually arguing. Not the simpering disagreement that ladies were taught to deploy. Real, passionate debate. He couldn't help himself. He moved closer, staying in the shadows where he could hear but not be noticed. That was when he got his first real look at her. She wasn't a classic beauty, not in the way society defined it. No golden ringlets or porcelain skin. Her hair was a rich brown, pulled back simply. Her dress was modest, well-made but not expensive. She wasn't trying to stand out. But there was something about her face. Intelligence burned in her dark eyes. Her mouth was mobile, expressive, made for speaking truths instead of platitudes. And when she smiled, really smiled at something one of the men said, it transformed her entire face. She was arguing about the poor laws. The men around her were dismissing the struggles of the working class with the casual cruelty of those who'd never known hardship. And she wasn't having it. "With respect, Lord Pemberton," she said, her voice calm but firm, "if you'd ever actually visited the workhouses you're so quick to defend, you might reconsider your position. Children are dying of preventable diseases. Families are being torn apart. Reform isn't radical. It's humane." One of the men laughed condescendingly. "You have a kind heart, Miss Ashton, but the world doesn't run on kindness. It runs on order, on hierarchy. Some are meant to lead, others to follow. That's the natural way of things." She tilted her head, and Sebastian saw fire flash in her eyes. Natural. How convenient that the natural order always seems to benefit those already at the top. Perhaps if we had more leaders who'd actually experienced suffering, we'd have policies with more compassion and less cruelty. Sebastian found himself frozen. He couldn't look away. In a world where everyone wore masks, where every word was calculated for advantage, here was someone saying exactly what she thought. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress. She simply was. Authentic. Real. And it struck him like a physical blow. For the first time since Thomas died, since the war, since he'd become the Duke and inherited a life he never wanted, he felt something. Interest. Fascination. A spark of life in the deadness that had consumed him. He didn't approach her that night. He simply watched. He learned her name by listening. Miss Eloise Ashton. Daughter of a country gentleman with a modest estate. No title. No great fortune. Exactly the kind of woman the Duke of Ashford would never be expected to notice. Which made her perfect. When she finally left the musicale with her family, Sebastian remained behind, his mind already working. He turned to Hartley, who'd been watching him with knowing amusement. Find out everything, Sebastian said quietly. Where she lives. Where she goes. What she reads. Who her friends are. I want to know everything about Miss Eloise Ashton. Hartley raised an eyebrow. Everything. That's a bit obsessive, don't you think? Sebastian took a sip of his wine, his eyes still on the door where she'd exited. I don't think. I know. And I don't care. Find out everything. Over the next 3 months, Sebastian became a man he barely recognized. He, who valued privacy and solitude above all else, suddenly found himself everywhere Eloise Ashton was. It started small. He learned she visited Hatchett's bookshop every Thursday afternoon. So he began appearing there, browsing the same sections, close enough to observe but not engage. She loved poetry and political philosophy. She bought books on social reform. Once, he watched her argue with a clerk about whether women should be allowed to purchase certain texts. She won. Then there was the lending library on Piccadilly. She went every Tuesday morning. He arranged to be there, reading newspapers in the corner, watching as she selected books with careful consideration. She had a habit of reading the first few pages before deciding. Sometimes she'd smile at a passage. Sometimes she'd frown and put it back. He found himself wanting to know what made her smile. The Royal Academy Gallery became another hunting ground. She attended every new exhibition, often alone or with just her younger sister. He started appearing at the same showings, standing across rooms, studying her as she studied the art. She had opinions. Strong ones. He once overheard her tell her sister that a particular portrait was technically perfect but emotionally dead. The artist painted what he saw, not what he felt, she'd said. There's a difference. Sebastian had stared at that painting for 10 minutes after she left, trying to see it through her eyes. Hyde Park during the fashionable hour provided the most opportunities. She rode a gentle mare, her sister beside her, taking the same path 3 times a week. So Sebastian rode his black stallion along that same path, always at a distance, always watching. She sat straight in the saddle, confident but not showy. She smiled at children playing. She stopped once to help a lady whose horse had thrown a shoe. Kind. Genuine. Everything society wasn't. Hartley confronted him after 6 weeks. You're stalking her, his friend said bluntly over brandy. This isn't courtship. It's obsession. I'm being thorough, Sebastian replied. When I make my move, I need to be certain. Certain of what? That she's perfect? No one's perfect. That she's worth it, Sebastian corrected. That she's real. That what I saw that first night wasn't an act. And she is. She's exactly what I thought. More. Even. So when are you going to actually speak to her? Hartley asked. Soon, Sebastian said, swirling his brandy. Very soon. I'm simply waiting for the right moment. The perfect opportunity. That opportunity came at the Devonshire house ball, exactly 3 months after that first sighting. Sebastian had learned enough. He knew her habits, her values, her heart. He knew she volunteered at an orphanage every Tuesday afternoon after the library. He knew she read to the children and brought them sweets from her own small allowance. He knew she had a younger sister she adored and parents she respected. He knew she was kind, principled, intelligent, and utterly unimpressed by titles or wealth. She was everything he'd been searching for without knowing he was searching. And tonight, he would finally make his move. Tonight, the watching would end, and the claiming would begin. He stood in the shadows of the Devonshire ballroom, a glass of champagne in his hand, his eyes locked on her across the crowded room. She wore a simple gown of pale blue. Nothing fancy. But she glowed. And when she laughed at something her sister said, that real, genuine laugh, Sebastian made his decision. He'd been patient long enough. It was time. The Devonshire house ballroom was a spectacle of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles. The air was thick with expensive perfumes and the sound of a full orchestra. Lords and ladies in their finest silks and jewels moved across the polished floor like pieces on a chessboard. Everyone who mattered in London society was here tonight. And they were all watching. Sebastian had timed his entrance perfectly. Late enough to make an impression, early enough to catch Eloise before she was claimed for too many dances. He spotted her immediately, standing near the refreshment table with her mother and sister. She looked slightly uncomfortable, not quite belonging to this glittering world. Her gown was pretty but modest. Her jewelry was simple. She wasn't trying to compete with the peacocks around her. She was just herself. And that made her stand out more than any diamond necklace could. Lady Constance Pemberton, a beautiful widow with ambitions as sharp as her cheekbones, intercepted him the moment he entered. Your Grace, she purred, offering her hand. What a delightful surprise. I'd heard you were avoiding society this season. She'd been pursuing him since his brother died. Everyone expected them to marry. She had the pedigree, the connections, the calculating intelligence that would make her an excellent duchess. On paper, she was perfect. In reality, she left him cold. Lady Constance, he said politely, kissing her gloved hand with the barest touch of his lips. I'm making select appearances. Tonight seemed worth the effort. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. She thought he meant her. He didn't correct her assumption. Not yet. Instead, he excused himself with practiced courtesy and made his way across the ballroom, toward Eloise. The crowd parted for him. They always did. A duke commanded space simply by existing. He was aware of the whispers starting. The Duke of Ashford never danced. Not once this entire season. He attended events like a marble statue, watched for an hour, then left. The betting books at White's had odds on whether he'd dance before summer. The smart money was on no. He stopped directly in front of Eloise. Her mother saw him first and nearly dropped her fan. Her sister's eyes went wide. But Eloise, she simply looked up at him with those intelligent dark eyes and waited. No giggling. No false surprise. Just calm attention. Miss Ashton, he said, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. Would you do me the honor of this dance? The ballroom went silent. The orchestra was still playing, but it suddenly seemed very far away. Eloise's mother made a small squeaking sound. Her sister grabbed her arm, and Eloise studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Your Grace, she said finally, her voice steady. I'm surprised. I was under the impression you didn't dance. I don't, he replied, holding out his hand. Usually. But tonight, I find myself making exceptions. She looked at his extended hand, then back at his face. He could see her mind working, trying to understand what was happening. They'd never been formally introduced. He was a duke. She was the daughter of a country gentleman. This violated at least a dozen social protocols. But he'd been watching her long enough to know she wasn't a slave to protocol. "Very well, Your Grace," she said, placing her hand in his. "I accept." The touch sent electricity through him even through their gloves. He led her onto the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. Behind them, he could hear the explosion of whispers. Lady Constance's face was a mask of shock and fury. But Sebastian didn't care. All that mattered was the woman now in his arms. The waltz was scandalous when it first arrived from Vienna. Too close. Too intimate. But it had become acceptable, barely, in the highest circles. Still, it required a man to hold a woman in his arms, his hand at her waist, their bodies moving in synchronization. It was as close to an embrace as society allowed in public. And Sebastian intended to take full advantage. "You've been watching me," Eloise said quietly as they began to move. It wasn't a question. He didn't insult her intelligence by denying it. "I have. For 3 months now," he admitted. "Every Thursday at Hatchett's. Every Tuesday at the lending library. The gallery. Hyde Park. I've made quite a study of you, Miss Ashton." Most women would find that alarming, she said, but there was no fear in her voice. Just curiosity. "Are you alarmed?" he asked. "Should I be?" She countered. "That depends," he said, guiding her through a turn, "on whether you believe I mean you harm. And do you?" "No," he said simply. "Quite the opposite, in fact." They moved in silence for a moment, and Sebastian was acutely aware of how perfectly she fit in his arms. She was a good dancer, light on her feet, following his lead effortlessly. But she wasn't passive. He could feel her strength, her independence, even in the way she held herself. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why watch me? Why this?" He looked down at her, and for once, he didn't hide behind his title or his careful control. "Because 3 months ago, I heard you argue about social reform with 3 pompous lords who deserved to be taken down several pegs. Because you said exactly what you thought without caring what they thought of you. Because in a room full of people performing their assigned roles, you were the only one being real." Her eyes widened slightly. "You were there. At Lady Annalise's?" "In the back," he confirmed. "In the shadows. Where I've apparently been spending a great deal of time lately. And you've been following me ever since," she said. Her tone was hard to read. "Some might call that stalking, Your Grace." "Some might," he agreed. "I call it being thorough. I don't make decisions lightly, Miss Ashton. Especially not important ones." "And I'm an important decision?" she asked. "The most important one I've faced in a very long time," he said honestly. The waltz was coming to an end. He could feel the eyes of 300 people on them. This moment would be in every scandal sheet tomorrow. The Duke of Ashford's first dance. With an unknown miss from the country. It would cause a sensation. "You still haven't answered my question," Eloise said as the music slowed. "Why this? Why now?" "Because I'm done watching," he said. "I know everything I need to know about you, Eloise Ashton. I know you're kind and intelligent and brave enough to speak truth to power. I know you value substance over spectacle. I know you're exactly the kind of woman I want in my life. And I'm done pretending I don't." The music stopped. They stood in the center of the floor, his hand still at her waist, her hand still in his. The entire ballroom was watching. "And Your Grace," she said softly, "what exactly do you want from me?" "Everything," he said. The word hung between them, a promise and a claim all at once. Then he stepped back, bowed with perfect formality, and escorted her back to her stunned mother. The ballroom erupted in whispers the moment he walked away. The next morning, Sebastian's carriage appeared outside the modest Ashton residence in Bloomsbury at precisely 11 o'clock. The servants who opened the door looked terrified. The Duke of Ashford didn't make social calls in neighborhoods like this. But Sebastian walked in with the confidence of a man who belonged everywhere, because he did. Mr. Ashton, Eloise's father, was a kind-faced man with ink-stained fingers and the slightly bewildered look of someone who spent more time with books than people. He nearly fainted when Sebastian was announced. "Your Grace," he stammered, bowing so low Sebastian worried he might hurt himself. "This is an extraordinary honor. We weren't expecting, that is, we hadn't imagined." Sebastian put him at ease as much as possible. "Mr. Ashton, I apologize for the intrusion, but I have a matter of some importance to discuss with you. Regarding your daughter." At the word daughter, Mrs. Ashton appeared from nowhere, her face flushed with excitement. Eloise followed more slowly, her expression wary. She'd known this was coming. She was too intelligent not to have understood what last night's waltz meant. Sebastian got straight to the point. He wasn't a man who believed in wasting time or words. "Mr. Ashton, Mrs. Ashton," he began formally, "I wish to court your daughter with the intention of making her my Duchess. I recognize that we've only just been formally introduced, but I have observed Miss Ashton's character over these past months, and I am convinced she possesses the qualities I seek in a wife: intelligence, integrity, and a genuine heart. With your permission, I would like to begin a formal courtship." The room went completely silent. Mrs. Ashton looked like she might actually pass out. Mr. Ashton opened and closed his mouth several times without managing words. Eloise's younger sister, Clara, was gripping the arm of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. And Eloise, she just looked at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Your Grace," Mr. Ashton finally managed. This is beyond anything we could have hoped for our daughter. The honor you do our family, I can't, that is, we would be delighted to." "No," Eloise said. The single word cut through the room like a knife. Her mother gasped. Her father froze mid-sentence. Clara made a strangled sound. And Sebastian felt something shift in his chest. Not disappointment. Intrigue. Eloise stood up, her posture straight, her voice calm but firm. She looked directly at him, and he saw no fear. Only conviction. "Your Grace, I am deeply sensible of the honor you do me," she said, her words careful but unyielding. "But I must respectfully decline. I won't marry for duty or convenience, even to a duke. I require a meeting of minds and hearts, not a transaction. I appreciate your interest, but I cannot accept a courtship based on observation from the shadows, no matter how thorough. If you truly wish to know me, you'll have to do better than watching from a distance." The rejection was devastating. Not just to Sebastian, but to her family. Her mother looked horrified. Her father was speechless. Clara was staring at her sister like she'd lost her mind. No one refused a duke. No one. Especially not a woman with no title and modest means. It simply wasn't done. But Eloise had done it. And Sebastian found himself respecting her even more. He stood slowly, his face revealing nothing. Inside, his heart was pounding. She'd said no. She'd actually said no. To him. To a dukedom. To everything most women in London would sell their souls for. Because it wasn't enough for her. Because she wanted authenticity, not arrangement. Because she was exactly who he thought she was. "Miss Ashton," he said quietly, "I respect your position. Perhaps I haven't made my case persuasively enough." He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "You're right, of course. Watching from shadows isn't the same as truly knowing someone. I trust we'll speak again soon. And next time, Miss Ashton, I won't be in the shadows. He left the Ashton household with every member of her family staring after him in shock. Every member except Eloise, who stood in the drawing room with her arms crossed, her heart pounding, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the bravest decision. Outside, Sebastian climbed into his carriage with a smile playing at his lips. She'd said no. She'd refused a duke. And somehow, impossibly, that made him want her even more. The game had just begun. By morning, all of London knew. Eloise descended to breakfast to find her mother white-faced at the breakfast table, 3 scandal sheets spread before her like accusations. Her father stood by the window, jaw clenched. Even her younger sister Clara looked frightened. Eloise, her mother's voice trembled. "What have you done?" She took her seat with what she hoped was composure, though her stomach churned. "I declined an offer of courtship, Mama. Hardly a capital offense. The Morning Post calls you the season's most spectacular fool," her father said quietly. "The Gazette wonders if you've lost your senses." And Lady Whistledown. He picked up the most notorious sheet. "Lady Whistledown suggests you must have secrets worth hiding to refuse such an advantageous match." The words stung more than Eloise expected. She'd known there would be talk, but seeing her character questioned in print felt like standing naked before the Ton. "They're saying terrible things," Clara whispered. "That you must be compromised. That there's some scandal you're hiding. That's absurd, is it?" Her mother's voice rose. "Because I cannot fathom any other reason for such reckless behavior. A duke, Eloise. A wealthy, handsome, titled duke showed you favor, and you threw it back in his face like yesterday's tea. I explained my reasons." "Your reasons?" Her father turned from the window, and Eloise saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Your reasons may have destroyed your sister's prospects along with your own. What gentleman will court a family that produces daughters who publicly humiliate dukes?" The accusation hit its mark. Eloise's gaze flew to Clara, who looked away, eyes shining with tears. "The Worthington Ball is tonight," her mother continued, voice breaking. "Lord Pemberton was expected to ask Clara to dance. Now, who knows if he'll even acknowledge us?" Guilt twisted in Eloise's chest, but she forced herself to remain firm. "I will not marry without love. Not even for love." Her mother laughed, the sound bitter. "Love is a luxury for girls with nothing to lose. You have a family, responsibilities, a position to maintain. But you've thrown it all away for what? Pride. Principles. Some foolish notion of romance?" The breakfast room door opened before Eloise could respond. The Duke of Ashford, their butler, announced, looking slightly panicked. Sebastian walked in as if he owned not just his own duchy but every room he entered. He was impeccably dressed, devastatingly handsome, and completely at ease despite the palpable tension. "Forgive the early intrusion," he said smoothly. "I hoped to find Miss Ashton at home." Eloise's mother stood so quickly her chair scraped. "Your Grace. Of course, please, sit, join us. Thank you, but I'll stand." His gaze found Eloise's, held it with that unnerving intensity she remembered from the waltz. "I've come to discuss a matter that affects your daughter." "The gossip," her father said grimly. "Your Grace, we are mortified, as am I." Sebastian's voice carried an edge that made everyone straighten. "Mortified that my sincere interest in your daughter has been twisted into scandal. Mortified that vicious tongues are questioning her character when the fault, if any exists, is mine." Eloise stared. What was he doing? "I should have been more discreet in my pursuit," he continued. "Should have anticipated that the Ton's appetite for drama would turn a gentleman's courtship into spectacle. Miss Ashton's only crime was honesty, a rare and valuable quality that I, frankly, find refreshing." Her mother blinked. "You're Not offended by her refusal? Offended? A slight smile curved his lips. On the contrary, Lady Ashton, your daughter has given me something no woman has in years, a challenge. She sees past my title to the man beneath. She demands substance over ceremony. These are qualities I not only respect but actively seek. Then you still wish to court her? Her father's voice was carefully neutral. With your permission and her eventual consent, yes. Sebastian's eyes never left Eloise's face. Though I understand Miss Ashton requires time to consider. I'm a patient man when the prize is worth waiting for. The possessiveness in his tone made heat rise in Eloise's cheeks. As for the gossip, Sebastian continued, turning to address her parents, I'll ensure it dies quickly. This evening at the Worthington ball, I'll make my continued interest abundantly clear. No one will dare question Miss Ashton's character when a duke publicly defends it. That's most generous, Your Grace, her mother managed. Not generosity, Lady Ashton. Self-interest. He smiled, but something dangerous lurked beneath. I protect what's mine. Before Eloise could protest that she was decidedly not his, Sebastian bowed. Until this evening. He left as smoothly as he'd arrived, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Well, her mother said faintly. That was extraordinary, Clara finished, eyes wide. Eloise said nothing. Her heart pounded traitorously. He'd just claimed her before her entire family, not with proposal or declaration, but with that simple phrase, I protect what's mine. She should be furious. She was furious. Wasn't she? The Worthington ball that evening was packed to suffocation. Every member of the ton who could secure an invitation had done so, drawn by the irresistible scent of scandal. Eloise felt their stares the moment she entered. Fans snapped open to hide whispered conversations. Eyes tracked her progress across the ballroom. She held her head high, but her hands trembled in her gloves. Ignore them, Clara whispered fiercely, gripping her arm. But ignoring was impossible. She heard the scattered words, refused a duke, must be mad, something wrong with her. Then a voice cut through the whispers, clear and mocking. Perhaps she's been compromised already. Why else refuse? Eloise turned to find Lady Constance Fairfax holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by her usual circle of sycophants. The beautiful blonde met her gaze with deliberate malice. I mean, one must wonder, Lady Constance continued, voice carrying. What sort of woman turns down a duke unless she's already ruined? Or perhaps she's simply too peculiar for proper society. Several guests gasped. Others tittered behind their fans. Rage bubbled in Eloise's chest, but before she could respond, a voice like winter frost cut through the crowd. Lady Constance. Sebastian materialized from the crush, his expression pleasant but his eyes glacial. The entire ballroom seemed to still. Your Grace. Lady Constance's smile was saccharine. We were just discussing. I heard what you were discussing. He moved to stand beside Eloise, not touching but close enough that his proximity was unmistakable. And I find I must correct several misconceptions. Every eye in the ballroom fixed on them. Miss Ashton, Sebastian said clearly, is neither compromised nor peculiar. She is, in fact, the most sensible woman of my acquaintance. She refuses to accept courtship from a man she barely knows, regardless of his title. This speaks not to madness but to intelligence and integrity, qualities apparently lacking in those who would slander her. Lady Constance paled. Furthermore, Sebastian continued, his voice hardening, I consider any insult to Miss Ashton an insult to myself. I trust one make myself clear. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Cross Eloise, and you cross a duke. Of course, Your Grace, Lady Constance managed weakly. I meant no offense. Then we understand each other. Sebastian turned to Eloise, and his expression softened infinitesimally. "Miss Ashton, would you honor me with this dance?" She should refuse. Should maintain her independence, not let him fight her battles. But the earnest hope in his eyes, hidden beneath the ducal command, undid her. "Yes, Your Grace." His hand closed around hers, warm through their gloves, and he led her onto the floor. The orchestra began a waltz. "You didn't have to do that," Eloise murmured as they began to move. "I know." His thumb traced a circle against her palm, hidden from view. "But I wanted to. Because I'm yours." She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "That's rather presumptuous." "Is it?" His eyes met hers, intense and searching. "Tell me honestly, Eloise, do you feel nothing when I'm near?" Her breath caught at his use of her Christian name. "That's hardly. Do you not wonder why we keep finding each other? Why every conversation feels like coming home? Why I can't stop thinking about you, even when I know I should?" Sebastian, his name escaped before she could stop it. There. Triumph flickered across his face. "You feel it too." She wanted to deny it. Wanted to maintain her walls, her principles, her careful independence. But dancing in his arms, she felt something shift. The way he held her, firm but reverent. The way he defended her without being asked. The patience in his pursuit, even after rejection. "I won't be collected like one of your estates," she warned. "I'm not collecting you. I'm courting you. There's a difference." "Is there?" "You show up everywhere I go." "Yes." No denial, no shame. "Because being near you is the only time I feel alive." The raw honesty stole her breath. 3 months, he continued quietly, moving them through the waltz with unconscious grace. "I've watched you for 3 months, Eloise. I know you visit the orphanage every Tuesday. I know you steal your father's political journals. I know you hide in the library during balls because you find most conversation tedious." She should be horrified. Instead, she felt seen. "That's rather obsessive, Your Grace." Completely. His smile was self-deprecating, but his eyes blazed. "You've made me obsessive, challenging, desperate, things a duke should never be. And I find I don't care." The music ended. They stood facing each other in the center of the dance floor, the entire ton watching. "I'll wait," Sebastian said softly, "as long as it takes. Until you see what I see, that we're inevitable." He released her hand, bowed, and walked away, leaving Eloise standing alone, heart pounding, certainty crumbling. Clara appeared at her elbow moments later. "Ellie," she breathed. "You're falling for him." "I'm not, you are. I can see it. And I think he might actually love you." Eloise watched Sebastian across the ballroom, accepting congratulations from various lords, playing his ducal role perfectly. But his eyes kept finding hers through the crowd, hungry and patient. "That's what frightens me," she whispered. The next 3 weeks were a siege. Sebastian didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply persisted. Books arrived at the Ashton residence, philosophy texts she'd mentioned wanting, political treatises she'd argued about. Always with a card in his bold handwriting. "Thought this might interest you." He appeared at the same events she attended, but never crowded her. He'd catch her eye across a room, smile slightly, and turn away, giving her space but making his presence known. He sent flowers, but not the usual roses. Instead, her favorite peonies, with a note reading, "I notice everything." It was methodical, calculated, utterly strategic, and devastating. The invitation arrived on heavy cream paper, sealed with the Ashford crest. "The Duke of Ashford requests the pleasure of the Ashton family's company for a weekend at Ashford Hall." Eloise stared at the elegant script, her stomach performing an uncomfortable flip. "We must accept," her mother declared, already mentally planning wardrobes. To refuse would be a direct insult. "He knows that," Eloise muttered. He's maneuvering me. Brilliantly, Clara added with a grin. You have to admit, he's rather good at this. Eloise had no response. Because her sister was right, Sebastian was excellent at strategy. Every move calculated, every gesture deliberate. He'd turned courtship into a campaign, and she was losing ground daily. 3 days later, the Ashton carriage rolled through the gates of Ashford Hall. Eloise's breath caught despite herself. The estate sprawled across the countryside like something from a painting, all golden stone and soaring columns, manicured gardens stretching toward ancient woods. Magnificent, imposing, and somehow lonely. Sebastian waited at the entrance, perfectly composed in buckskin breeches and a dark coat that emphasized his broad shoulders. But as their carriage drew near, Eloise saw something flicker across his face. Nervousness? Anticipation? It vanished as he handed her mother down, then her sister, offering each the perfect degree of ducal courtesy. When his hand closed around Eloise's, he held it a heartbeat longer than necessary. Welcome to Ashford Hall, he said, his voice low enough that only she heard. Welcome home. The presumption should have annoyed her. Instead, warmth spread through her chest. The interior matched the exterior's grandeur. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, priceless artwork adorning every wall. But something felt wrong. It took Eloise several moments to identify what. Nothing was lived in. Oh, the house was immaculate. Perfectly maintained, expensively furnished, precisely arranged. But it felt like a museum. A shrine to ducal perfection with no hint of actual human habitation. No books left casually on tables. No flowers past their prime. No comfortable clutter that suggested someone actually lived here rather than simply existed. The gallery is quite famous, Sebastian was saying, leading them through endless rooms. Portraits dating back to the 15th century. My mother particularly loved the Rubens in the morning room. He spoke like a tour guide, gesturing to architectural features and historical anecdotes. Playing the perfect host. But Eloise noticed his shoulders were tense, his smile slightly fixed. He was nervous. The Duke of Ashford, who commanded rooms with a glance, was nervous showing them his home. Why? And these are your rooms, he said, stopping before a suite of chambers overlooking the gardens. I hope you'll find them comfortable. Dinner is at 8. I'll leave you to rest. He started to withdraw, but Eloise caught his arm. Sebastian. He stilled at her touch, at her use of his name. Thank you, she said simply, for inviting us. Something vulnerable crossed his face, quickly hidden. Thank you for coming. After he left, Clara flopped onto the enormous bed. This place is incredible. Like something from a fairy tale. It's beautiful, Eloise agreed. But it doesn't feel like a home. Because it isn't one. Not for him, anyway. Her sister's perceptiveness sometimes startled her. Did you see how he looked when showing us around? Like he was displaying someone else's property. Eloise had seen it. And it bothered her more than she wanted to admit. That evening, after an elaborate dinner where Sebastian played the perfect host, Eloise found herself unable to sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet, and her mind too full of the man sleeping somewhere in this vast, lonely house. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and ventured into the corridors. Ashford Hall at night was different. Shadows pooling in corners, moonlight streaming through tall windows, the building settling with creaks and sighs. She wandered without direction, drawn by curiosity and something she couldn't name. She turned a corner and stopped. A door at the end of the corridor was different from the others. Darker wood, older, and locked. She could see the keyhole even from a distance. Every other room she'd passed stood open or ajar. But this one was sealed tight. Can't sleep? Eloise spun, heart leaping. Sebastian stood behind her, still dressed despite the late hour, cravat loosened and hair slightly disheveled. He looked younger like this. More real. I was exploring, she admitted. I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding. He moved closer, his eyes finding the locked door. Something painful crossed his face. Though I should have known you'd find your way here eventually. You always find the truth of things. What's in there? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my brother's study. The grief in those 3 words was palpable. Thomas, Eloise said softly, remembering the memorial stone she'd seen in the family chapel. Sebastian nodded. Dead at Waterloo. 3 years ago now, though some days it feels like yesterday. I'm so sorry. Everyone's sorry. His voice was flat. Sorry he died. Sorry I lived. Sorry the wrong brother came home. Eloise's breath caught. Sebastian, it's true. He laughed, the sound hollow. Thomas was meant to be Duke. Charming, diplomatic, perfect for the role. I was the spare, the soldier, the one who could be risked. And when the battle came, I survived and he didn't. Cosmic joke, really. The pain in his voice made her chest ache. Will you show me? She asked impulsively. He looked at her sharply. What? The study. Will you show me? Why would you want to see it? Because it matters to you. Such a simple answer. But something in his expression cracked. Without speaking, he pulled a key from his pocket, worn smooth, as if touched often, and unlocked the door. The study was frozen in time. Papers still scattered across the desk, as if Thomas had just stepped out. Books open to pages never finished. A riding coat draped over a chair. Even the fire was laid, waiting to be lit. I haven't changed anything, Sebastian said quietly. Can't bring myself to. Stupid, I know. It's not stupid. Eloise moved carefully into the room, aware she was entering sacred space. It's love. He stood in the doorway, too large for the frame, shoulders hunched as if carrying an impossible weight. He would have been a better Duke. Better everything. Perhaps. Eloise turned to face him. But he's not here. You are. You think I don't know that? Anger flickered in his eyes, not at her, but at fate, at war, at himself. Every day I wake up in a role I never wanted, in a house that doesn't feel like mine, playing a part that should have been his. And everyone expects me to be grateful for the privilege. Are you? She asked softly. Grateful? No. The word was torn from him. I'm angry, guilty, lost. I survived a war only to feel dead inside. He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his gaze stole her breath. Until I saw you. Eloise's heart stuttered. That night at Lady Annalise's musicale, he continued, moving into the room, drawn toward her as if pulled by invisible thread. You were arguing about factory reform with Lord Pemberton, completely unafraid of offending him. So alive, so passionate, so real. And for the first time since Waterloo, I felt something other than numbness. Sebastian, I started watching you. Following you. His laugh was self-deprecating, like some obsessed madman. Learned your routines, orchestrated encounters. Captain Hartley thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But you were the first thing that made me want to live rather than just survive. He stood before her now, close enough to touch. Moonlight slanted through the window, illuminating the planes of his face, the intensity in his eyes. This house, this title, it's all a tomb for someone else's life, he said. But when you're near, it feels like maybe I could build something new. Something mine. Something real. Eloise couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the pull between them, magnetic and undeniable. You watch people, she whispered, remembering her observation from weeks ago. That's why you noticed me. I notice you because you're the only real thing in a world of performance. His hand lifted, hesitating near her cheek. "May I?" She nodded, and his palm cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "I've been patient," he murmured, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I've waited, courted properly, given you space. But standing here, in the one place I'm honest about who I am, I need you to know. I'm not playing games, Eloise. This isn't ducal strategy or aristocratic maneuvering. This is me, Sebastian, not Ashford, telling you that you've become essential to my existence." "I scare you," she breathed. "Terrify me." His smile was crooked, genuine. "Because you see past everything I use to keep the world at arm's length. You see the broken soldier pretending to be a duke. And somehow, you're still here." The air between them crackled with tension. His gaze dropped to her lips, darkened with want. She swayed toward him, drawn by something beyond reason. "If I kiss you," he whispered, "I won't stop at one. And you'll be compromised, forced to marry me whether you want to or not. And if I want to kiss you anyway?" His control wavered. "Eloise," a knock echoed through the corridor. "Your Grace?" A servant's voice. "Forgive the intrusion, but Captain Hartley has arrived with urgent news." Sebastian closed his eyes, jaw clenched with frustration. Damn. The moment shattered. He stepped back, and Eloise felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. "I should." He gestured helplessly toward the door. "Yes. Of course." He moved to leave, then turned back. "This conversation isn't finished." "No," she agreed softly. "It isn't." After he left, Eloise stood in Thomas's study, surrounded by another man's life, and realized something terrifying. She was falling in love with a duke who'd been claiming her heart piece by piece for months. And she didn't know if she had the strength to resist anymore. They returned to London 2 days later. Something fundamental changed between them. Sebastian no longer maintained careful distance. His hand found hers at every opportunity, helping her from carriages, guiding her through crowds, the touches lingering, possessive. His eyes followed her constantly, barely concealing hunger. And Eloise? She'd stopped pretending not to notice. Clara watched them with knowing amusement. "You're going to accept him, aren't you?" "I don't know," Eloise admitted. But it was a lie. She did know. Her heart had already decided, even if her pride needed more time. The Royal Exhibition opening was the event of the season. The Prince Regent himself would attend, along with every member of the ton who mattered. Eloise dressed with unusual care, choosing a gown of deep sapphire silk that made her eyes luminous. For Sebastian, she admitted to herself. She was dressing for him. The exhibition hall was magnificent. Soaring ceilings, glittering chandeliers, priceless artwork displayed against silk-covered walls. The crowd was equally dazzling, jewels catching light, conversation buzzing like bees. Eloise arrived with her family, scanning the crowd for one particular dark head. She found him across the room, devastating in evening black, speaking with several lords. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met, and his expression softened into something private, warm, meant only for her. He started toward her, but Lady Constance Fairfax intercepted him. Eloise watched with mild amusement as the blonde simpered up at Sebastian, clearly angling for his attention. He'd handle her with his usual cold courtesy, and Lady Constance stumbled, crying out. Sebastian caught her automatically, and she fell against him, hands clutching his coat. They stood frozen in what looked like an intimate embrace, her face pressed to his chest, his arms around her. The crowd noticed. Conversation faltered. Heads turned. And Lady Constance looked up at Sebastian with theatrical distress, tears streaming down her face. "Your Grace, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." She swayed again, and Sebastian, ever the gentleman, couldn't simply drop her. He supported her weight, looking uncomfortable but trapped. "Someone fetch her mother," he said tersely. But the damage was done. The entire ballroom had witnessed a duke holding another woman in his arms. Witnessed her crying against his chest. Witnessed what looked remarkably like an intimate moment. Eloise stood frozen across the room, ice forming in her chest. Lady Constance's mother materialized with suspicious speed, along with several other matrons who ushered the distressed girl toward a private room. But before disappearing, Lady Constance glanced back at Sebastian with something triumphant in her eyes. Then her gaze found Eloise's, and she smiled. Understanding crashed over Eloise like a wave. This was deliberate. Staged. A trap designed to look like Sebastian had been caught in an inappropriate situation. And it was working. Whispers already spread through the crowd. Did you see? In his arms like that. Poor Lady Constance, so overcome. I heard they've been secretly meeting. Lies. All lies. But the ton fed on scandal, and Lady Constance had just served them a feast. Sebastian's eyes found Eloise's across the crowded room. She saw frustration there, anger, a plea for understanding. He started toward her, but the crowd was thick, and several gentlemen stopped him to ask about that unfortunate incident. Eloise couldn't breathe. The walls closed in. She needed air, needed escape, needed, there you are. She turned to find Sebastian beside her, having somehow navigated the crowd. Relief flooded his face. Eloise, that was nothing. Lady Constance staged, I know. Her voice came out flat. I saw. Then you understand. I understand that you're always at the center of these situations. The words emerged before she could stop them, fueled by hurt and fear and the awful vulnerability of having opened her heart. First the gossip about me. Then her accusations. Now this. Perhaps the problem isn't Lady Constance. Perhaps it's you. His expression shuddered. You can't possibly believe I encouraged. Can't I? She felt herself retreating behind old walls, protecting the heart she'd been foolish enough to expose. You're a duke, Sebastian. Women throw themselves at you constantly. Maybe you've grown so accustomed to it you don't even notice anymore. Maybe you enjoy the attention more than you admit. That's not fair, isn't it? You pursued me with calculating precision. Orchestrated encounters, manipulated circumstances, admitted to watching me for months. How do I know this isn't just another game? Another conquest? Pain flashed across his face. You know me better than that. Do I? I've known you mere weeks. Yes, you showed me your brother's study, shared your grief. But maybe that's just another strategy. Maybe the vulnerability was as calculated as everything else. Eloise, he reached for her. She stepped back. The crowd watched avidly, sensing drama. I see you're occupied, Your Grace. She kept her voice level despite the trembling inside. Perhaps Lady Constance suits you better. She certainly seems more interested in a duke's title than I could ever be. Don't. His voice dropped to a growl. Don't do this. Do what? Protect myself. You told me yourself, you're calculating, obsessive, strategic. Well, congratulations, Your Grace. Your strategy worked. You broke through my defenses. Her throat tightened. But I won't be one of many. I won't wonder if every woman in London has felt your arms around them, heard your confessions, been subjected to your calculated pursuit. There are no other women. There's one draped across you right now, wherever your mother took her to recover. The words came out bitter. And before her, a dozen others at every ball, every musicale, every damned event where dukes are treated like prizes to be won. I never wanted them. I want you. Want. She seized on the word. Not love. Want. Like one wants an estate or a painting or any other acquisition. Well, I refuse to be collected, Your Grace. I told you that from the beginning. The ballroom had gone silent. 300 witnesses watched the Duke of Ashford being publicly rejected, again. Sebastian's jaw clenched. You're being unreasonable. I'm being honest. Something you claimed to value. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to pour every ounce of hurt and fear and defensive anger into her gaze. I refuse to be one of many, even for a duke. I refuse to spend my life wondering if I'm enough, if you'll tire of me, if the next Lady Constance will succeed where she failed. That will never happen. You can't promise that. You don't even know if this is real or just obsession born from grief and loneliness. Maybe I'm simply the first thing that made you feel alive after your brother died. Maybe in 6 months, a year, you'll wake up and realize you never actually wanted me. You just wanted to feel something. That's not true. His voice was raw now, stripped of ducal polish. Isn't it? Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Tell me honestly, Sebastian, if I weren't the one who refused you, would you still want me? Or is it the challenge I represent? The conquest I'd be? He stared at her, stricken, and in his silence, she found her answer. That's what I thought. She stepped back, creating distance that felt like death. Goodbye, Your Grace. I hope you and Lady Constance will be very happy together. Eloise, don't. But she was already turning, already walking away, head high despite the shattering inside. The crowd parted for her like water, whispers erupting in her wake. Clara caught her arm at the entrance. Ellie, what happened? Take me home. Her voice broke. Please, just take me home. Behind them, Sebastian stood alone in the center of the ballroom, public failure etched across his face. The Duke of Ashford, rejected twice by the same woman. The scandal would fuel gossip for months. But Eloise couldn't care about scandal. Could only feel the awful, wrenching pain of a heart breaking before it had even fully admitted to being in love. Sebastian stood motionless as the crowd buzzed around him, their excited whispers a distant roar. He'd been publicly humiliated, rejected, cut down before the entire ton, and he deserved every second of it. Your Grace. Captain Hartley appeared at his elbow, expression grim. We should go. No. Sebastian's voice was granite. Find Lady Constance. Bring her to the library. Now. Sebastian. Now. Hartley. His friend recognized that tone, the one Sebastian had used on battlefields, ordering men to their deaths if necessary. Hartley disappeared into the crowd. Sebastian moved through the ballroom like an avenging angel, ignoring attempts at conversation, declining insincere condolences. He found the library empty and dark, which suited his mood perfectly. 10 minutes later, Hartley returned with Lady Constance, who looked far less distressed than she had earlier. In fact, she looked rather pleased with herself. Your Grace, she purred. If you wanted privacy, you need only have asked. Enough. The single word cracked like a whip. She blinked, her smile faltering. Sebastian moved closer, and something in his expression made her step back. This wasn't the polished duke who graced ballrooms. This was the soldier who'd survived Waterloo, who'd killed men with his bare hands, who'd learned that sometimes mercy was weakness. That was quite a performance, he said softly. The stumble, the tears, the convenient witnesses. Very well orchestrated. I don't know what you, don't insult my intelligence. His voice could have frozen fire. You staged that entire scene. The question is why. Lady Constance's composure cracked slightly. You were supposed to choose me. I'm beautiful, connected, perfect for a duchess. But you ignored me for that. That nobody. A girl with no family, no fortune, nothing to recommend her but impertinence. Miss Ashton, Sebastian said with deadly precision, has more substance in her smallest finger than you have in your entire manufactured person. She refused you. Lady Constance's facade shattered completely. Twice. She humiliated you before all of London, and you still pursued her like some lovesick fool. Well, now she's humiliated you again, and this time, everyone knows it was your own fault. My fault? Sebastian's laugh was cruel. No, Lady Constance. This disaster is entirely yours. You manipulated circumstances, spread rumors, staged a scene designed to make me look compromised. All because you couldn't accept that I wasn't interested. I did you a favor. That girl doesn't appreciate what you are, she appreciates who I am. There's a significant difference. He moved closer, and she retreated until her back hit the bookshelf. Let me be extraordinarily clear. You have manipulated, schemed, and lied your way into destroying something precious. The woman I love, yes, love, Lady Constance, now believes I'm exactly the calculating bastard I'd worked so hard not to be. You don't love her, Lady Constance scoffed, but fear flickered in her eyes. It's obsession born from rejection. It's love. The words came with absolute certainty. Love that makes me want to be better than I am. Love that terrifies me because she sees through every defense I've built. Love that made me feel human again after years of numbness. He leaned in, and his voice dropped to a whisper that promised retribution. And you destroyed it. Fatal mistake. Lady Constance paled. You can't prove anything, can't I? He smiled without humor. You underestimate how much power a duke wields, and how little mercy I have for those who hurt what's mine. He straightened. By morning, every family in London will know what you did. Your reputation will be ash. No respectable gentleman will court you. Your own family will be mortified. You wouldn't. Watch me. He turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Lady Constance? If you ever speak Miss Ashton's name again, if you even look in her direction, I will ensure your family's ruin is complete and permanent. Do we understand each other? She said nothing, shock and terror warring on her face. Excellent. Sebastian walked out, leaving her to contemplate her spectacular fall from grace. Hartley waited in the corridor. Feel better? No. Sebastian's fury had drained, leaving only hollow ache. She was right, you know. Eloise. About everything. She was hurt and scared. She was accurate. He slumped against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I did pursue her with calculating precision. Did orchestrate encounters. Did manipulate circumstances to manufacture closeness. Maybe she's right that it's obsession, not love. Do you believe that? Sebastian closed his eyes, seeing Eloise's face in his mind, the way she'd looked at him in Thomas's study, vulnerable and open. The way she'd almost kissed him. The way she'd shattered before his eyes tonight. No, he whispered. I love her. Which means I need to let her go. Or, Hartley suggested quietly, you could fight for her. Sebastian's eyes opened. She doesn't want me to fight. Doesn't she? She refused you once to test your resolve. Refused you tonight because she's terrified of being hurt. Every time you let her walk away, you prove her fears right, that you don't care enough to chase her. I've been chasing her for months, strategically, carefully, with ducal restraint. Hartley grinned. Maybe it's time to stop being a duke and start being a man in love. Grand gestures, Sebastian. Public declarations. The kind of spectacle that proves she's not a conquest, she's your entire world. Sebastian stared at his friend, mind racing. That could backfire spectacularly. Or it could work. Hartley clapped his shoulder. Either way, you'll know you tried. And at least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what if. What if? The two most dangerous words in the English language. Sebastian pushed off the wall, decision crystallizing. Hartley, I need you to gather some information. And send word to the household, we're going to make some changes. What kind of changes? Sebastian smiled, and for the first time in hours, it was genuine. The kind that prove I'm done being patient. The kind that show Eloise Ashton she's been mine from the moment I first saw her. The kind that mean I'm claiming her for good, and I don't care who knows it. The announcement appeared in the Morning Post the following day. The Duke of Ashford is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Eloise Ashton. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks' time at Ashford Hall. 3 weeks. Not the customary 6 months of engagement. Not even the more acceptable 3 months. 3 weeks, barely enough time for gossip to settle, let alone for proper preparations. But Sebastian had been patient long enough. 3 weeks. Eloise's mother had nearly fainted. How am I supposed to prepare a proper wedding in 3 weeks? I'll provide whatever resources you need, Sebastian had said calmly. Seamstresses, florists, caterers, anything. But the wedding happens in 3 weeks, or I'm procuring a special license and will marry tomorrow. Eloise had hidden her smile behind her hand. The Duke giving orders, but his eyes on her the entire time, checking if she agreed. She did. She'd spent enough time refusing him. Now she wanted to be his wife. The ton, naturally, lost its collective mind. The scandal was delicious. The Duke who'd been publicly refused twice was now marrying the woman who'd rejected him. The same woman who'd kissed him in the rain where half the street could see. The romance of it all had every matron sighing and every young lady demanding to know why their suitors weren't standing in storms for hours. Lady Whistledown's scandal sheet practically sang with approval. This author must confess, she did not see this coming. But perhaps that is the beauty of it. Miss Ashton refused a duke and made him prove himself a man. And prove himself he did, with a dedication that would make even this author's cynical heart flutter. One can only hope the rest of society takes note. Titles mean nothing without the character to support them. At the Countess of Jersey's ball, the first event Sebastian and Eloise attended as an engaged couple, the ton watched with rapt attention. They arrived together, Sebastian's hand possessively at the small of her back. He wore ducal perfection like armor, but his eyes held only warmth when they looked at her. The whispers started immediately. Did you hear he stood in the rain for hours? I heard it was Lady Constance's scheming that nearly ruined everything. Apparently the Duke personally ensured her exile. They say he's been obsessed with her for months. Sebastian ignored them all. He had eyes only for Eloise. But halfway through the evening, as they stood near the refreshment table, he did something unexpected. He raised his voice, commanding attention without effort. If I might have everyone's attention. The ballroom quieted instantly. A duke requesting attention was rare. A duke in love requesting attention was unprecedented. Sebastian turned to face the crowd, Eloise's hand firmly clasped in his. I know there's been considerable speculation about my engagement. I thought it appropriate to address the matter directly. Eloise's eyes widened. Sebastian, what are you, sure? Let me do this properly. He squeezed her hand, then addressed the room. 3 months ago, I met a woman who changed everything I thought I knew about myself. She was intelligent, passionate, and entirely unimpressed by my title. When I asked to court her, she refused. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. She refused, he continued, because she saw what most of you don't, that a duke's title means nothing without a man's heart behind it. She demanded I prove myself worthy not as Ashford, but as Sebastian. And she was absolutely right to do so. The ballroom was utterly silent now. I pursued her with everything I had. Orchestrated encounters. Sent gifts. Made myself present in her life. And still she refused me, because she understood something crucial. Love cannot be strategized or commanded. It must be freely given. His eyes found Eloise's, and the raw emotion in them made her throat tight. At the Royal Exhibition, I was caught in a situation designed to compromise me. She witnessed it and believed, momentarily. that I was not the man she'd begun to trust. She walked away, protecting herself from potential hurt. And I realized something. I had spent so long being strategic that I'd never simply been honest. He turned fully to her now, the ton forgotten. So here is my honesty, before 300 witnesses. Eloise Ashton, you refused a duke and taught me that my title is worthless without authenticity. You challenged me to be better, to feel more, to want something beyond duty and grief. You made me realize that surviving is not the same as living, and that true strength lies in vulnerability, not armor. Tears pricked Eloise's eyes. Today I stand before you not as a duke seeking a duchess, but as a man who loves you with everything he has. A man who would stand in the rain for days, weather any scandal, face any challenge, because losing you would mean losing the only real thing in my carefully constructed life. The crowd was completely still, captivated. You asked me once if I'd still want you without the challenge of your refusal. My answer is yes, 1,000 times yes. I'd want you if you'd accepted me immediately. I'd want you if you refused me forever. I'd want you in any circumstance, any world, any lifetime. Because you're not a conquest or an obsession. You're my home. A tear slid down Eloise's cheek. So yes, he said, voice strengthening, I asked her to marry me. Not as a duke acquiring a wife, but as a man wholly, desperately, irrevocably in love. And when she accepted, when she kissed me in the rain and claimed me as thoroughly as I'd claimed her, I became the luckiest man in England. He raised their joined hands. I present to you not my bride-to-be, but my equal, my partner, the woman who saw past every defense and loved the broken soldier hiding beneath, the woman who refused a duke and won a heart. The ballroom erupted in applause. Eloise couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Sebastian had just laid himself bare before all of society, stripped away every ounce of ducal pride, and declared his love in the most public way possible. You're impossible, she managed. I'm yours, he corrected. There's a difference. She kissed him then, right there in the middle of the Countess of Jersey's ballroom, and the crowd cheered. Lady Jersey herself approached afterward, fan fluttering. Your Grace, that was quite the declaration. I apologize if it was too forward. Forward? It was magnificent. She beamed at them both. True love displayed so openly, it's exactly what society needs. You've given everyone hope that authentic connection still exists among the ton's machinations. Captain Hartley appeared, grinning broadly. Well done, old friend. Though I think you've set an impossible standard for every other gentleman in London. Good, Sebastian said, not taking his eyes off Eloise. Let them work for it like I did. As the evening continued, Eloise noticed something. The ton's attitude had shifted. Where before there'd been scandalous whispers and judgmental stares, now there was genuine warmth. Sebastian's public declaration had transformed their story from scandal to romance. But more than that, she realized he'd given her something precious. Public proof that this wasn't strategy or calculation, but genuine, overwhelming love. 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations. The wedding would be at Ashford Hall, but Sebastian insisted on changes. The cold, museum-like quality had to go. He brought in fresh flowers, rearranged furniture for comfort rather than display, and, most significantly, opened Thomas's study. Are you sure? Eloise asked as they stood in the doorway together. Yes. His hand found hers. Thomas would want someone to use it. And I think it's time I stopped living in a shrine and started building a home. They worked together, carefully packing Thomas's things, preserving memories while making room for new life. Eloise found letters, journals, mementos that Sebastian had been too heartbroken to face. He would have liked you, Sebastian said quietly, holding a letter his brother had written from the front. He always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me brood. Then I'll do my best to honor his memory by being appropriately impertinent. He laughed, the sound easier now. Grief still lived in him, but it no longer consumed him. The night before the wedding, as tradition dictated, they separated. But Sebastian found her in the garden at midnight. "You're supposed to be in your room," Eloise said, fighting a smile. "Since when do I follow rules?" He pulled her close, and she melted into him. "I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about tomorrow. Nervous. Terrified," he admitted. "That I'll wake up and discover this was a dream. That you'll change your mind. That I don't deserve this happiness." She cupped his face. "Sebastian, you deserve every bit of happiness life can offer. And I'm not going anywhere. Tomorrow, I become your wife. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Every day, I choose you." He kissed her then, tender and reverent. "I love you. I love you too. Now go back inside before someone catches us and we cause another scandal. Would that be so terrible? You're impossible. I'm yours." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Eloise stood in her chamber at Ashford Hall, staring at herself in the mirror. The gown was exquisite, cream silk with delicate embroidery, simple but elegant. Her mother had wept when she first saw it. Clara had declared her a fairy tale princess. But Eloise felt like herself. Just more. More hopeful, more certain, more ready for whatever came next. "You look beautiful," Clara said, adjusting the veil. "Ready to become a duchess?" "Ready to become his wife," Eloise corrected. "The title is incidental. That's what makes you perfect for him. You see the man, not the duke." A knock at the door. Her father entered, eyes shining with emotion. "It's time." The ceremony was held in Ashford Hall's chapel, intimate, with only close family and friends present. As Eloise walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Sebastian immediately. He stood at the altar, resplendent in formal black, but it was the expression on his face that stole her breath. Raw love, barely contained joy, and something like wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe this was happening. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're stunning. You're biased." Completely. The ceremony began, but Eloise barely heard the words. She was too focused on Sebastian, on his hands holding hers, steady and warm, on his eyes, locked on her face as if memorizing every detail, on the slight tremor in his voice when he spoke his vows. Traditional vows felt inadequate, so they'd written their own. Sebastian went first, his voice strong despite the emotion underneath. "Eloise, 3 months ago you refused a duke. Today, I stand before you not as Ashford, but as Sebastian, a man who loves you beyond reason or sense. I vow to see you, always, not as a prize or a conquest, but as my equal and my home. I vow to choose you, every day, in every way. I vow to be worthy of the gift you've given me, your heart, freely offered. You've claimed me utterly, and I am yours, now and always." Eloise's throat tightened. When it was her turn, she spoke clearly. "Sebastian, you watched me for months before I even knew your name. You saw me when I felt invisible. You challenged me to be brave enough to accept love when it terrified me. I vow to be your partner in all things. I vow to see the man beneath the title, always. I vow to choose your heart over all the dukedoms in England. You claimed me with a gaze, and I claim you right back, now and forever." The priest pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride." Sebastian pulled her close, and the kiss was both a promise and a homecoming. The small crowd erupted in applause, but Eloise heard only her own heartbeat and his whispered finally against her lips. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and the joy on both their faces made several guests reach for handkerchiefs. The breakfast that followed was warm and intimate. Captain Hartley gave a toast that made everyone laugh, to the Duke who proved even the most strategic military mind can be undone by love. Clara cried through her entire speech. You refused a duke and became a duchess, but more importantly, you found someone who loves you exactly as you are. But it was Sebastian's father-in-law who made Eloise tear up. Your Grace, you pursued my daughter with determination that would have been alarming if it weren't so clearly rooted in genuine love. You proved that patience and persistence, when combined with authenticity, can win even the most stubborn heart. Welcome to our family. As the celebration continued, Sebastian pulled Eloise aside. Come with me. I have something to show you. He led her to his study, formerly the cold, formal room where dukes conducted business. Now it was transformed, comfortable furniture, books scattered on tables, and most significantly, 2 desks instead of 1. One for me, he said, gesturing to the larger desk. And one for you. Because you're not just my wife, you're my partner. Your mind, your opinions, your work, they matter. This is our space now. Eloise's eyes filled. Sebastian, I mean it. I want your voice in decisions. Your perspective on the estates. Your ideas about how we can do better, be better. You refused to marry a title. Well, you didn't. You married a man. And that man wants to build a life with you, not just install you in one. She kissed him fiercely. I love you. I love you more. Impossible. Want to wager on that? Their laughter filled the study, the first of countless moments of joy that would fill this house, transforming it from a museum to a home. Later, as they prepared to depart for their wedding trip, Eloise found her sister near the gardens. You did it, Clara said, hugging her tight. Refused a duke, became a duchess. No, Eloise corrected gently. I refused a title. I accepted a man. There's a difference. The best kind of difference. Clara pulled back, eyes dancing. Though you have to admit, the rain kiss was rather spectacular. It was, wasn't it? Think he'll spend your entire marriage making grand gestures? Eloise laughed. Probably. He's rather dramatic when he's in love. Good. You deserve dramatic love. You deserve everything. As the carriage pulled away from Ashford Hall, Sebastian's hand found Eloise's, threading their fingers together with comfortable possession. Happy? He asked. Deliriously. Good. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life ensuring you stay that way. That's quite an ambitious goal, Your Grace. I'm nothing if not ambitious when it comes to you. His lips brushed her temple. After all, I claimed you months ago with nothing but a look. Now I get to claim you every day for the rest of our lives. Arrogant Duke. Your arrogant Duke. Mine, she agreed, turning to kiss him properly. And I'm yours. Always. As the carriage rolled toward their future, Eloise thought about the journey that had brought them here. Her defiance, his patience, the misunderstandings and revelations, the rain-soaked confessions and public declarations. They said she defied a duke. The truth. She'd claimed one right back. And that made all the difference.